Welcome. When a high-stakes political figure steps away from the limelight um, and pens a memoir right after a devastating loss, you have to ask, don't you? Are we getting the real history, unfiltered? Or is it more of a carefully constructed defense? Can that politician's very personal narrative ever really be separated from the, let's say, objective historical truth?
It's a fundamental tension, isn't it? Especially with political memoirs. They're vital records, sure, but always filtered. Filtered through the author's need to shape their legacy, maybe settle some scores. That subjectivity,
Yeah.
that's the real challenge for us as readers.
Exactly. And that's precisely why we believe some books, well, they demand to be challenged. Today, we're undertaking a deep dive into Kamala Harris's postmortem political memoir, 107 Days. Now, this critique uses, where it fits, a step-by-step critical thinking framework. We map claims to evidence, drawing from Richard Paul and Linda Elder's work. We also bring in an intellectual framework based on Mortimer J. Adler, and we use the Golden Rule and the U.S. Preamble to look for ethical asymmetries. Then we wrap up with a logical analysis and aim for a balanced conclusion.
And just so you know, you're experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation. This is powered by Google's NotebookLM, designed for a deeper, more dynamic book critique.
Okay, the context for 107 Days is absolutely crucial. It covers Harris's incredibly frantic 2024 presidential run. This is right after President Biden's unexpected, very late withdrawal. So it's a postmortem, really, written after an election cycle marked by intense polarization and, of course, Harris's defeat by Donald Trump.
Let's start by unpacking her argument. What claims does she actually make to explain that loss?
Right, we need to look at her central assertions and see what evidence she provides right there in the text. The first one, and it feels like the most dominant thread, is this belief that her campaign was actively undermined by insiders.
Yes, she spends a lot of ink on this, detailing specific instances. The evidence she puts forward includes recounts of whisper campaigns, feeling sort of deliberately excluded from key strategy talks.
And getting maybe lukewarm support from big names in Biden's
Exactly. She paints a pretty clear picture of, well, internal bad faith, as she saw it.
which contrasts sharply with her second assertion, this quieter but firm claim about her own qualification. She points to her prior experience, her record, her national name recognition, basically saying she was absolutely ready to win.
And that creates an immediate tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If she was so qualified, why did the undermining, as she presents it, actually work?
Then there's the sheer lack of time, her third main point. The punishing timeline. She gives loads of detail about the schedule, how constrained it was, just frantic, asserting the campaign simply didn't have the runway, only 107 days, to properly reach voters, build support, define her message, especially against Trump in that climate.
But she doesn't just blame external forces. She expresses significant frustration with internal Democratic disunity. That's another key point. She shares specific examples, instances where key figures or groups seemed hesitant or even pulled back support when they really needed that momentum.
Right, when things were critical. And then, of course, the external pressures. Her next point covers these external factors. She talks about Trump's, well, duplicity and the media environment. Toxic is the word she often uses. She recounts conversations, specific media attacks, arguing they created this almost impossible obstacle course.
Which feeds into the complexity of her position regarding Biden, the loyalty conflict. She talks about being reluctant to openly criticize the outgoing president or his team during that really awkward transition.
Suggesting this constrained her early messaging, maybe made her response to internal critics seem less aggressive than perhaps it needed to be.
Right. And finally, she turns to the electorate itself, discussing the voter impact. She specifically mentions difficulties with targeted outreach, suggesting the impact on Gen Z and Latino voters was, well, pivotal, highlighting where the campaign struggled to connect.
Okay, so we have those claims laid out. Now let's shift a lens slightly. We'll apply the intellectual framework, moving from what she says to what kind of truth it might represent. We'll use that Adlerian model: opinion, knowledge, and understanding.
And what's always fascinating with political memoirs is how much rides on that first category: opinion. Harris's interpretations, right? Her beliefs about loyalty, internal motives, who betrayed whom. These are largely opinions, asserted with real conviction, definitely, but, other people in the room might reasonably disagree.
Absolutely, but it's not all subjective. The second category, knowledge, is where we find the documented facts, descriptions of campaign events, those specific timelines, recounting key conversations she says she had with Biden, with staff, opponents. These are claims that are, in theory at least, verifiable, things that happened.
And the third level, understanding. This is where she tries to weave those details into broader arguments, connecting the campaign chaos to bigger themes like gender, race, institutional inertia within the party. She's aiming for a deeper understanding of the systemic forces, though we have to acknowledge it's an understanding filtered through her own intense experience.
And that filter, that inherent partiality, brings us neatly to the ethical dimension of this critique. Let's look at the ethical tightrope she's walking, starting with the Golden Rule assessment.
Yeah, this is where you feel the friction. Harris writes powerfully from a position of feeling wronged. That key insiders hesitated, maybe didn't believe she could win. But does she fully explore the other side of that coin, the reciprocal stakes?
That reciprocity is key. Other people's worries about her electability, they likely didn't stem from malice. Probably from a genuine, maybe even overwhelming fear of a broader electoral defeat for the party, a fear the final result, sadly, seemed to validate. Her expectation of just unwavering support perhaps didn't fully account for others' legitimate, shared concerns about the ticket's chances.
And there's a kind of irony baked into the book itself, isn't there? While she details her frustrations, this very candid post-campaign critique, it might actually risk damaging the very unity she says she values.
Yeah, airing grievances so publicly can sometimes become a self-fulfilling prophecy, more factionalism.
We can see this tension play out further, using the preamble as a sort of civic benchmark. Take the goal of forming a more perfect union. The book mostly focuses on democratic fractures, right? It risks deepening those splits.
It does risk that. Yet, on justice, it raises really important points. Valid issues about fairness and how candidates, especially women and candidates of color, are supported and represented within the party's internal processes.
True. But then consider tranquility. Does airing all this dirty laundry calm things down or stir them up?
Short term, it feels like the latter, potentially inflaming discord rather than resolving it.
And while the book champions the liberty of candid self-accounting, you have to weigh that against potentially undermining the party's collective interest. It's a balance.
It is. And this feels like a good spot for a quick pause, maybe a mindful moment. We're using these structured frameworks, tools of rational thought, to dissect a complex political text.
Right. And for those of you looking for more analyses like this, resources that encourage reflection and rational thinking, check out Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, critiques, and these deep dives.
Okay, continuing on. Let's move into the logical analysis of her arguments in the book. It definitely has logical strengths. The chronological recounting of events is very clear, and commendably, there's a willingness to assign some blame to herself, not just others. That suggests a degree of good faith.
But the weaknesses in the logic are maybe where we get the most insight. Sometimes the arguments feel a bit circular. It stops the analysis from really getting to the root of the systemic failure.
Yeah, that loop sounds something like, I lost because I wasn't supported enough. Okay? And I wasn't supported enough because they weren't convinced I could win. You see, that self-justification can sometimes get in the way of a truly objective look at the structural reasons for the loss.
We also spotted occasional logical fallacies, maybe not surprising in this kind of charged writing. A subtle ad hominem here and there aimed at unnamed rivals, and definitely a strong appeal to emotion when recounting the loss and disappointment. Understandable, but it can pull the reader away from critical assessment.
So finally, we arrive at the highest level of our critique, the wisdom assessment. Does 107 days offer lasting wisdom for American democracy, or is it mainly just a very detailed campaign post-mortem?
It certainly seems to aspire to wisdom. It definitely highlights the real danger of party infighting. And it cautions against, well, both excessive loyalty and excessive factionalism. It warns about rushed decisions, like after Biden's late exit.
And that caution is valuable, no doubt, but what keeps it from achieving maybe true enduring wisdom is the lack of a constructive path forward. It identifies flaws, the rushed process, the toxic environment, but it doesn't really offer concrete, practical remedies. There's no clear plan for renewing or protecting democracy beyond this specific campaign's failure.
Okay, let's try to synthesize all this into a balanced conclusion. What's the main takeaway from 107 days?
Well, it undeniably provides candid, behind-the-scenes insight into a really wild and important election. Harris does show honest reflection on some missteps, reveals some personal vulnerability, especially about that intense pressure cooker timeline.
But, as we've discussed, it remains partial introspection. It could use greater empathy for the perspectives of other stakeholders, those reciprocal stakes we talked about.
Yeah.
And there are clear rhetorical tensions between her calls for unity and the act of assigning very specific blame internally.
Ultimately, you could say the book feels like a missed opportunity, an opportunity to offer deeper, more structural solutions to the flaws in primaries and party governance that contributed to the whole situation. Hopefully, using this framework helps you, the listener, separate the personal justification from the broader historical record.
Which brings us to some unresolved questions for you to think about. What structural reforms might Harris actually support to prevent this kind of intra-party mess from happening again? And how can future candidates possibly bridge that empathy gap our Golden Rule analysis exposed?
If you're looking for other perspectives in this genre, Hillary Clinton's What Happened offers an interesting comparison. And for really understanding how we classify knowledge opinion versus fact versus understanding Mortimer J. Adler's works on epistemic critique are very helpful.
Just to reiterate, this integrated assessment was conducted by systematically applying logical, ethical, and epistemological standards. The goal was to provide a precise, integrated assessment for practical readers and anyone interested in using reflective frameworks for political analysis.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book analysis. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.